prohibited 39 years ago, church attendance is down, and lawmakers have legalized divorce, same-sex marriage, and abortion. And since 2004, thousands of sex abuse accusations have been made against Irish clergy. Protesters gathered today in Dublin to demand justice for survivors. They're also calling for an end to impunity for abusers many say the church has long protected.
Trust will not be returned within the Catholic population from simply what Pope Francis will say to the Catholic population. He needs to make clear that actions are going to be put in place and what those actions are going to be.
Despite the challenges faced by the church, some Roman Catholics remain optimistic.
I think the church is really in a bad state at the moment, and I think maybe like alcoholism, you have to go to ground level to rise up again. So I think maybe at the minute it really is near ground level, and hopefully his visit to Ireland will do some good.
The wishes of one Catholic. But for many survivors of abuse, they have been failed and for too long. How much faith in church can be restored will at least partly depend on what Pope Francis says and does during this visit. Sarah Balter, TRT World.
Let's talk to Matthew Bunson, who's a senior contributor at a Catholic television network. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Matthew Bunson, welcome. For the victims, the Pope's words of sympathy and words of condemnation have been a very, very long time coming.
Well, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, has mentioned on a number of occasions his sorrow, his regret, and even his anger at the large number of sex abuse accusations that have taken place not just in Ireland, but around the world, including such far-flung places as Chile, Australia, and of course the United States. What abuse victims, the abuse survivors, are looking for, and they've said it again today after Pope Francis's words on his arrival in Ireland, is what he plans to do about it in terms of concrete actions. And so far, Pope Francis has not spoken directly about what plans he has, and I think that's a major issue that's still looming ahead for both the Pope and the Church.
And will that be received with a sense of disappointment that today could have been an opportunity for the Catholic Church to set out compensation to the victims? That hasn't happened. Words are easy. The actions for the Roman Catholic Church seem to be much, much harder.
Well, what we've seen with Pope Francis is, as we saw in Chile just a couple of months ago, are very clear statements of regret, sadness, and anger. That was then followed, for example, by bringing all of the Chilean bishops to Rome. And what followed that was the mass resignation of the Chilean bishops. Now, we've had the Irish bishops, for example, already brought to Rome. We've had a number of resignations there. The question is how Francis is going to deal with what is really the next phase of the sex abuse crisis, and that is dealing with the role of the bishops and especially restoring the credibility, the moral credibility of the Church and its leadership in places like Ireland and, of course, increasingly now in the United States. Concrete actions now have to follow, and I think Pope Francis is aware of that. Look for him to speak again about this tomorrow when he has an open-door mass in Dublin with possibly as many as 500,000 people in attendance.
We were hearing in our report just now that Ireland has freed itself from the shackles of a once powerful, a once dominant Catholic Church. Are we seeing the slow collapse of the Catholic Church around the world?
It depends on where you're looking, of course. In Ireland, the Church has been crippled severely by the problems of the clergy sexual abuse crisis, as well as the loss of credibility on the part of the Irish bishops. What we're seeing around the world, also, as in Ireland, is increasing secularization and increasing movement against all religions. And that's something that every faith needs to be aware of and to take steps to try to correct. The Church, of course, in Ireland has suffered a number of crippling defeats, as you just mentioned, in terms of the referendums. What stands now as the task is finding a way to overcome issues such as secularization and materialism that have certainly taken hold in Western Europe, and to bolster the faith, the Christian faith, the Catholic faith, in places like Africa and the Latin American regions of the world, where, in fact, the Catholic faith is still very strong, but, as I just noted, in places like Chile and Honduras and even increasingly in Argentina, the credibility of the Church is also coming into question because of this very issue. I think it is safe to say that the sex abuse crisis facing the church right now is one of the greatest crises that the church has faced, certainly in the last century, and one of the greatest crises it has faced since what's called the Protestant Reformation, dating all the way back to 1517.
And maybe societies have just taken a long, hard look at organised religion in places like Ireland and said, do you know what? It's now in the right place. It's no longer in a dominant part of our society, and we're very comfortable with that. Thank you very much. We do not want it to recover to its once dominant position.
Well, the risk there, as we have seen in different parts of the world, that where religion is completely excluded from a society, we have seen the emergence of not just secular, but materialist and even totalitarian regimes. None of us, I think, wants to have a return to the atheist states, for example, of the Soviet Union, in the oppression of the church and free speech and other aspects of life that we see in different parts of the world, including the People's Republic of China and elsewhere. What's needed, I think, is for the Catholic Church and faith in general to be able to speak, have a place in culture, to be heard and to contribute in the achieving of the common good, not just in religious settings, but in all settings, given the long history and contributions of religions to the development of civilization and to the pursuit of common good and stable societies.
Matthew Bunson in Washington, thank you. The United States is cutting more than $200 million in aid to the occupied West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The U.S. State Department says it's redirecting the money to projects elsewhere, which are